tough call.
There are certain hills to die on, and in medicine, we have a saying, do no harm. And that should apply to politics too.
A Liberal MP with a strong attachment to his reform roots struggles with the decision over what to do about his party support of the HST. The move to support the motion to harmonize British Columbia and Ontario's sales taxes with the GST was a controversial one for the Liberal leader. There has been growing opposition to the HST in both provinces. Two progressive Conservative MPPs even staged a sit-in inside the legislature at Queen's Park, a move their leader, Tim Hudak, was happy to support.
I want to commend Bill Murdoch and Randy Hillier for fighting for Ontario families, for standing on principle. Sometimes in politics you have to fight the good fight. Sometimes in politics an issue rises to the fore that is so wrong they need to take extraordinary measures to try to set it right.
Nevertheless, Michael Ignatieff thinks he and his party have made the right decision.
We believe the provinces, both British Columbia and Ontario, want this legislation. They believe that it will create jobs and employment in those two provinces. And I made a clear decision on this matter, and the caucus is behind that decision.
But not everyone was willing to fall in line. There were several empty seats behind Michael Ignatieff during Thursday's vote. Some MPs were late when the vote happened earlier than expected, but some clearly have doubts about the HST, including BC's Hetty Fry.
BC people have a problem with the HST. It is a wrong time to bring it in, but the government of British Columbia, which is a duly elected provincial government and which has under the Constitution the right to make its own decisions about taxation and fiscal policy, have signed an agreement with the federal government of Canada. We cannot stand in the way of that duly negotiated and duly signed agreement and constitutional right of a province.
So how are you going to vote once the actual vote comes along?
We'll see.
Not be here?
No, I don't get sick.
Well, one of the Liberal MPs who did not show up is Keith Martin. He represents the riding of Esquimalt-Juan-de-Fuca in British Columbia and joins me in studio this morning. Keith Martin, welcome to the House.
Thank you.
Are you as undecided and as unclear as Hetty Fry?
No, I oppose the HST, and the way this is being done in British Columbia is not right. It's not whether we have an HST or not. I believe that there is a third way. There is a way of actually crafting something that is going to accrue the benefits of an HST while mitigating the negatives. And there will be negatives in my province, particularly for major sectors such as the tourism industry, service sector, and also those people of modest means. They are going to get hurt by this.
What about the negatives for you?
It doesn't matter. What matters is that my job is to defend the interests of the people of my riding of Esquimalt-Juan-de-Fuca and my province. There are a lot of folks that are going to lose their job as a result of this. Instead of ramming this tax down the throat of British Columbians, there is another way. And in the Maritimes, they did that. What they did in the Maritimes is they consulted. They dropped the combined tax 4 percentage points, and they did a number of things to mitigate the negatives. In my province, that has not happened. And so when this first came out, I wrote an editorial piece that was published that provided a roadmap that the two senior levels of government could adopt that would enable us to accrue the benefits of a harmonized tax while mitigating the negatives. And those things would be, why don't we just apply the HST to that which the PST applies to? So it is a true harmonized tax between the GST and the PST, drop it 2 percentage points, consult widely, and
maybe you should run provincially, because I think the response to whatever suggestion you might have as to how the province of British Columbia could bring in the HST in a better way, that the point would be, you're not a provincial politician. This is provincial jurisdiction. And all this really is enabling legislation with a little bit of extra money to help them along.
Well, there is a $1.6 billion carrot from the federal government. The silent hand on the back of Premier Campbell is that of Mr. Harper. And it's a $1.6 billion carrot that's pushing at the back of Mr. Campbell at a time when we have large deficits. So the last point...
Are you saying he was bought?
Well, not at all. I'm saying Mr. Campbell was in a very difficult position. So as I said, the last point is that Mr. Harper should keep that $1.6 billion carrot on the table until Mr. Premier Campbell and his team can consult. The restaurant sector in my province is estimated it's going to have a $760 million loss every year. That's $50,000 per restaurant, and that means job losses, and that is not an option as far as I'm concerned.
Are you willing to lose your job over this, or at least your position in the Liberal caucus by voting against?
Well, there are certain hills to die on, and in medicine, we have a saying, do no harm. And that should apply to politics too. So my contention is that while Premier Campbell and the Prime Minister and Mr. Ignatieff certainly were all absolutely correct in saying that an HST will have some benefits, some economic benefits for the province, but it's also going to do harm. And I'm saying there is a third way. Why don't we just cool down and apply and implement the mitigating effects that will do no harm?
Okay, but let's be realistic here. Premier Campbell is not going to go your third way because you say so. He's made a decision. The Prime Minister has made a decision. The leader of your party has made a decision. They're supporting it. It's going to happen. So when the time comes for you to stand up and vote or abstain or perhaps not show up at all, I don't know what you're going to do. What will you do?
Well, depending, I'm currently into negotiations with my party to see if I can seek their permission to stand up and oppose the HST.
And what do you think the odds of that are?
I don't know. We will see.
Okay, well, let's try and establish the odds. I want you to listen to your leader from February of this year.
And after much discussion of this issue, my colleagues from Newfoundland and Labrador, I decided to permit them in the budget vote tonight a one-time vote of protest to signal their displeasure and my displeasure at these unilateral actions which, in my view, weaken our federation, cause strains in our federation at a time when Canadians should be pulling together.
So does everyone get a turn? The Newfoundland and Labrador MPs got a turn to vote against, and now it's BC's turn?
This is all a very interesting issue, isn't it? Because I think it sheds light on a much larger problem within Parliament, and that is that Parliament has become a highly undemocratic environment. And what Parliament needs to do is become a much more democratic institution where members of Parliament can execute the wishes and desires and hopes and aspirations of the people they represent, rather than trying to bring the wishes of Ottawa to their people.
But here was, as he explained it, it's a one-time only event. We're going to let them vote against. This is back in February because of the accord in the budget, which they did not like, the Atlantic Accord. And so they got their chance. But then the observation at the time was it's a precedent. You don't get to just say this is a one-time thing. Because what happens when something similar happens again and you've got MPs from a particular province who have difficulty with something that your leader wants to whip? And here we are.
Well, I think it's a sign of strength rather than a sign of weakness. And I think we've got to get away from this notion that if a leader, as Mr. Ignatieff wisely did with my colleagues from Atlantic Canada, to allow them to do something that their constituents felt very strongly about, then I think that's a sign of Mr. Ignatieff's strength.
It would be a sign of show of weakness if he didn't do it again?
I'm saying that we, from a cultural perspective in Ottawa, we have to get rid of this notion that if a leader allows their MPs to vote in a way that is contrary to what the majority of their party wants, that's actually a sign of strength because the leader, in this case Mr. Ignatieff, respected the will of the people that those MPs represent.
Finally, just so I'm clear, regardless of what your leader decides, whether he says you get a pass on this and you can do what you want or he doesn't, do you vote against this next week?
Well, as I said, I hope that we can arrive at an arrangement that is mutual, that allows us to do this. We'll see what happens when that vote comes up next week.
And if you can't come to an arrangement, that's what I'm asking you.
Stay tuned.
Keith Martin, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Keith Martin is the Liberal MP for Esquimalt-Juan-de-Fuca in British Columbia. It's also worth noting that some Conservative MPs also missed this week's HST vote. Like their Liberal colleagues, they might have been surprised by the quick vote, but word is some on the Conservative side of the aisle also have doubts about the HST.